Hello and welcome back to awtoolbox.com. My name's Glenn Keller, and in this video we're just wrapping up our single box install of Teamcenter and Active Workspace. There are a couple of things that we have not looked at just yet, though we've got Active Workspace running, the indexer, the viz system. There were a couple of other elements that we need to kind of check in on. One of which was Access Manager. We did preferences, we did user management. So just note that we do have the ability to switch in here to Active Admin and Active Architect. And I like to switch in here, we've seen this with the visualization stuff, to validate that my Workflow Designer app is working, my Access Manager app is working, and all of that opens up the way that I would expect it to, like this did. I also like to use the table configurator, which is a newer component in the new build that allows me to build up tables for each of my different views. So I like to make sure that that is there, and then so on and so forth. So just make sure you're validating the features that you add in. We had a lot of them, one of which was the dispatcher components, which we do have services running for. So if I come in here and look at the Teamcenter services, I have the dispatcher module, scheduler, and dispatcher client. And these are responsible for sending background processes or creating JT files, etc. So these components need to be tested, and inside of here they open up and start up. You usually start the scheduler, then the module, then the dispatcher client. But I've installed these in the Siemens server, Teamcenter 12, dispatcher server. So in here we've got the module, the stage in this location, and then the client is installed in the TC root. So if I look at the module and come into the configs, you'll notice that these are the configurations for that module, and the translator file in there points to these translators. So if I go into the translators, async service is what I have toggled on, and there's a README for it as well as the service that actually gets called. So definitely take a look at the translators and the individual prereqs in those READMEs. If I go back to dispatcher server, notice the logs are here, and I can jump into the dispatcher process log. There's my dispatcher client, scheduler, and module. If I open with code, I can see that this had a couple of small issues, but it was able to pick up on the password file. If I look at the module, open this up, then I can see that this async service is available as well as an out-of-the-box one, and it's ready to accept tasks. If I look at the scheduler, open this with code, then I can see that this was able to connect. It's ready to accept tasks, and it is connected. So everything seems to be running just fine. I'm going to go ahead and try something. I'm going to switch to my author location. And then in here, I'm going to generate a report. So I'm going to go to my Explorer window. This is the easiest way. You could also duplicate an assembly and run the async service. But in here, I'm just going to select an object, probably an object I've already created. You could also use folder. I'm going to select the object and then come in and choose New, Generate Report. So generate report, I've got a whole bunch of out-of-the-box reports I could run. I'm just going to do this one. And the goal here is I'm going to create a name. I'm going to call this Spec Test Report, and that way it creates it in my new stuff folder. But I'm also going to choose Run in Background, and that'll utilize the async service. I'm going to hit generate, and if it isn't set up, it will yell at you. So it'll say this hasn't been configured. So this has been run, and then I should get in my notifications once it's available, notify saying that it's ready, if it completes okay. If I go back to the module log at this point, open that back up, then we will be able to see that this is connected to the scheduler. And eventually, if you have enough output defined in these logs, you'll get some feedback as to what's happening. So if I click the new notifications, nothing's there. If I go to new stuff, I can see that I don't have that new component just yet. So I'm going to go to the scheduler, open up the log for the scheduler, and I can see that in the log it is all connected, so still no errors. Let's go ahead and go back up to the Teamcenter 2412, and you'll notice I had a little bit of a typo. I have two dispatcher folders. So in my build, the dispatcher folder has the dispatcher client and scheduler, and I've renamed the folder for the dispatcher directory for the module. So I may need to clean that up using Deployment Center, but the dispatcher client has its own logs directory, or its own directory, and if you were going to run this by itself, you would use run dispatcher client. If I go to scheduler, you can see this has its own directory, and if I were going to run that, it would be run scheduler, and notice the Windows services. So in here, I can see dispatcher client, module, scheduler are all set. And then in here, if I refresh, I should get, I just need to wait for it to finish its execution. I should get the new notification once it pops up. You can also install what's called the dispatcher client in Teamcenter. So if I come in to the rich client, there is a component that allows you to see these dispatcher request elements. You can also do advanced searches for them. It is just an element in the system. And once I show you inside of the rich client how to test it, we will take a deeper look. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. Let the Teamcenter Rich Client go. And in Active Workspace, I'm going to do an advanced search in here. Pull down the drop down. And I'm going to choose General. I'm going to clear all. And then in the type field, I'm going to do Dispatcher as the type. And notice there isn't anything that I can search on in that query list. So in here, if I come in, there's typically an additional tool across the top called Translator or Administrative Console. Those tools allow you to see dispatcher request objects. So to install those, you would need to install it with Deployment Center. But let's go ahead and go to my notifications to see if they're live. They are not live. So coming back into the dispatcher folder, dispatcher server, I'll go into my logs directory, dispatcher process, and there's my logs. So at this point, there is some output in those logs. If I refresh it and come back in, I'm going to open up the dispatcher client log, see if there's any more information in there. So again, it's still kind of functioning, but kind of not. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the dispatcher client, the dispatcher scheduler, and the dispatcher module. So now that they're all stopped, I'm going to start them up via command line to test out their processes. If I come back up to 2412, go into dispatcher, I want to start the scheduler first. I'm going to go into bin, I'm going to say run scheduler, I'm going to say run as administrator. So this will stay up and it will give me some feedback saying it's configured and it's ready to accept tasks. Then I'm going to go up to the Teamcenter 2412 into the dispatcher server module, and in here I'm going to go into bin, run module, and say run as administrator. Finally, once those two are up and you can see they connected, then I'm going to come back out, go into dispatcher, and run the dispatcher client. The dispatcher client has to start last, as this is required so that it can connect to the other two modules. So in here, I'm just waiting for this output. This is really all that you get. The 4-tier mode, the URL is up, and it is going to connect, and you can see now it's going through and starting the translation. So as a service, I am having errors related to this running. I can tell you that with the Viz components, I'm also having those issues. So that could truck down to an issue with the permissions running on the service, but let's go ahead and validate this. Let's go to Explorer. And then in the Explorer window, if I come down, I can see spec is here, but let's go into new stuff and you can see the spec test report gets generated. So this is now built. If I look at my notifications, I now have a notification here, and I know that the dispatcher server is set up correctly. It's only the services that are having a problem. One thing that you may want to look at when running a service is if you are configured with Wildfly or JBoss, inside of the standalone folder, in the configuration details, there is a standalone executable in here. And this, or standalone XML file in here. And this file, if I do a search inside of it for public, there is this public and management console, and you want to make sure that those are available for everything running in order to run services. You also want to make sure that the user you're running is a part of the administration group. So the goal of this is that dispatcher is running. Please take a look at some of our blog posts on resolving services for Teamcenter environments, or you can take a look at playing around with creating services, as the dispatcher components as well as the server manager and the Viz components all have a install service script that ships along with them. If I go into dispatcher client, then you'll see that dispatcher client win service script here. So in those videos, we'll take this a step further and resolve those service windows. But for now, the functionality is working, and we'll just minimize the prompts. Alrighty, so we've got dispatcher tested here. Everything is looking pretty good. We are just going to go ahead and test a couple other things. All right, moving on from getting our components for dispatcher working, we have a whole bunch of things running on the back end here. Again, pay attention to those services tutorials on creating services. We are going through and just making sure our environment is clean as possible at this point. So the only other things that I would highly recommend is to come in here and actually define all of this. I highly recommend after the fact coming out and exporting your environment. So I'm just going to run this little utility up here. I'm going to deselect what I have selected and say export all component properties, and choose export. So that's going to output this configuration, which is a quick deploy configuration, essentially creating a snapshot of my environment. If I open this with code, this right here is going to open up and save all of my settings for that environment. And I can also import that at a later date. In addition to that, if you come into CApp's Deployment Center, or Siemens Deployment Center, go into your repository, and then look at your quick deploy, your snapshot tool. So snapshots have now captured my Teamcenter 1 environment, snapshot, and my snapshot 01. Now this is from a previous day, so you can use the DC Quick tool to take additional snapshots to roll back your environment. In here, I have this up and running, and in future videos, we are going to take you through BMIDE deployments and things like that. But now, one of the only other things that we haven't validated is that the BMIDE opens. So I'm going to come in here and notice that in the Teamcenter 2412, there is no BMIDE shortcut. So I'm going to come into my File Explorer window, open up Apps, Siemens, Teamcenter 2412, TC root, BMIDE. I have the client and the templates. The templates are what I selected for install inside of the Deployment Center environment. So these templates right here relate to selecting the Business Modeler IDE, which is in here somewhere. There it is. And then if I scroll down in the Business Modeler IDE editor window, which will pop up here in a second, there it goes, then you'll see at the very bottom of this all these templates that have been selected. So if I select this little toggle, it'll show me the ones that are there. So there are prereqs to these templates. It's not kind of a one-to-one, but those templates are the templates in here. And then there's a master file right here that basically invokes each of those templates and allows them into the BMIDE to be used. If I come back up to the BMIDE and the client, you have the BMIDE app icon here and the BMIDE.bat, which is here. This is the client. I'm going to run that. You can create a nice shortcut if you would like. And what that'll do is launch that Business Modeler IDE tool. Now we do need to test this. This tool does require a connection to Teamcenter if you're doing things like display rules or testing dynamic compound properties or testing dynamic LOVs. Those types of things, their dynamic compound properties are more on the interface side of Active Workspace, so you're not going to test it in there, but for the dynamic LOVs you will. I'm going to create a workspace. It'll automatically build one right here. So anything you build in the system will be created by that workspace. And then once that workspace comes in, we can create and kind of test the BMIDE components a little bit. So notice that in 2412, it opens up like this. Across the top, you're going to see some additional options. These are related to Java. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to expand this little window, the restore window on the left-hand side, and see what I get. I'm getting a BMIDE window, which is exactly what I want. You can look through the assistant. I'm going to close it, or the welcome screen, or help for more information, or take some of our courses. But in here, if I look, I have all my BMIDE components, searches, everything. Window, show view. We'll have the Teamcenter view. And notice one thing that I am not seeing is the ability to switch between perspectives. If I come over to the right side, there is a little icon here. And you can still switch between your standard, which is the new standard as of Teamcenter 10, or the advanced perspective. If you switch to advanced, it'll give you the multiple views you're used to. If you switch to standard, you can see that it'll take you back to this view. I'm going to go ahead and create. I'm going to say BMIDE or file new, and then I'm going to create a new BMIDE template project. This template project, my prefix is going to be called PTA underscore. But notice it's yelling at me. It has to have a digit in one of them. So I'm going to call mine PTA1 underscore. And notice it's still yelling because it has to have a prefix between 2 and 4 characters. So I'm not quite there. So I'll call it P1 underscore. And notice third party requires a specific digit. So P3 underscore fixes the problem. Across the top of the field, it's going to tell you each time. Down below that, this is going to be my corporate template. And I may just put corporate, P3 corporate. Might actually even change that to training, P3 training. It truncates the next display name, so I'm just going to call it training template. And then I'm going to call this training template for testing. Now, we don't want to deploy this template unless we have changes to make to it, but it's going to use the templates directory that we just pulled up. And then when you choose next, you can base your template off of that templates directory. Highly recommend for Active Workspace, just immediately check this AWS2 box. That brings in all the Active Workspace configurations you'll need. I have change management, so I'm going to also pick that, but don't pick change management unless you have a license for it. Same goes with the rest of these templates. Depending on what you have installed, you can pick them or not pick them. In my case, I know that I have the reporting feature in Active Workspace, but I don't want to just pick the feature unless I know what I want to extend, because that'll make the whole package a lot bigger. So for now, I'm just going to hit Next. Pick English, hit Next. It'll create the base path for that in that workspace, so I'm good with that. You can also define where your SOA libraries and DLLs get created. And then you can pick configuration settings for compiling. In our case, we're just going to hit Finish, and it will create that project definition for me. And I now have a valid BMIDE. I just need to check on a couple of things that require connections to the server. So in most environments, your administrative teams will already have a package that they develop and work with. So that package will have to be imported into the new version to be upgraded prior to deployment. In here, if I just expand business objects, go into Item, I can test my connection display by going into Display Rules up across the top and choosing Add. Now I can choose Browse for the accessor name, and it's going to prompt me to log in with my 2-tier settings. So I'm going to pick my project, the environment, which it didn't update to Teamcenter training, and then provide my InfoDBA administrative credentials. I could supply group and role if I wanted to. It is case sensitive. Hit Connect, and it should apply the connection to the server. So when I click Connect here, it'll spin for a little bit, pop up a connection. It is via 2-tier, and this means it was successful. So I'll go ahead and hit Finish, and the accessor list from my system will open. So this is a great way to validate that this worked, but you can also go to the Window Preferences section and then expand Teamcenter, Server Connection Profiles, and then you can add additional connections to 4-tier, but you can also modify existing ones by changing how they connect or deleting them. In this case, it's TCCS, which is 2-tier. So the BMIDE is fully functional. You can package up a BMIDE template and set it in your software folder, and then go through the Deployment Center build, select that as an additional piece of media, and then generate your templates and deploy it out. Take a look at some of our BMIDE topics. The new 2412 BMIDE course will be coming out within the next month or so, and that'll include how to deploy via Deployment Center with a BMIDE package. In here, we're just taking you through the notes. So if you wanted to deploy this out, maybe you wanted to create a simple object, new business object. I wanted to call this P3 item, which is a derivative of the standard item, and I want to add a property to it. Let's just call this cage code. So I'll hit Finish. I've got a custom property, and I can hit Finish. So now I've got a nice little package here. I can say BMIDE save data model, hit OK, and then BMIDE generate software package, to hit Finish to generate that package. Now we'll go into details with all the options in later videos, but in here, if we come into project files, output, WinTix64, packaging, full update, that is your package. And I simply want to copy that package into my software location, which is under C Apps, Media, Siemens, Software. So I'm just going to paste this right in here along with my other media. And then I can go back into the Deployment Center window, go to Home, go to Software Repositories, and after a few minutes, we should see that that new media is picked up. So it may take a few minutes for it to actually catch. It takes a couple of minutes there. So once that pops up, we'll basically go to our environment and ensure that that is selected along with our 2412 media. So we're going to give it a minute. I just refreshed and it popped right up. You can see that it is the Teamcenter training 2412 WinTX64 versus the P3 training, which is our template. Then I can easily go back, go into my environment, let it load, and then I'll edit my selected software and choose this package. When I do that, I'll say update selected software. It'll apply that package to my environment, and then I can go to components and attempt to deploy it. So if I hit go to options, you can just kind of validate that it doesn't require anything else along that path. Nothing there. Applications won't have anything, but components will see the additional deployment. So I'll say save environment options. It's going through, loading the applications that we have selected. And then at this point, it should reload and pick up on that. All right, it has reloaded now, and we can scroll through that left side list. You can see that nothing about our BMIDE package is listed in there. I'm going to go ahead and go to components, let it run through and pick up on the components. So here we've got the BMIDE, everything's in there. Scroll down and you'll see that you do not see your package. It is just a part of the build. So at that point, I would go to deploy, generate the install scripts, and that will become a part of that. Then you'll take the install scripts and generate them and move those out. So again, feel free to take a look at our demo on the BMIDE deployment. From here, you simply just run your deploy script with the software location pointed to so it can do that update. So along with our shortcuts across the top, we have now went through all of our components for the most part in our install. We hope you have enjoyed this overview of installing Teamcenter 2412 on a single box instance. Pay attention as we release more and more content related to 2412 and eventually 2506 when it launches this spring. Feel free to send us an email or contact us if you have any questions, and we hope you have a great day.